Have you ever wondered why the rich get richer and others don't? Could it be that a small percentage of the population seek out others to find, study, and execute on legal loopholes that exist within our financial life and make it easier for them to prosper? The answer is a resounding yes. This is the Secrets of the Wealthy podcast with John Mintz. John has spent a lifetime researching and mastering the financial loopholes that he believes should be available to everyone. Join us as we explore different strategies that help you get farther faster towards building and enjoying a prosperous retirement.
Hello and welcome to the Secrets of the Wealthy with John Mintz. John, how are you?
You know what? I don't think I've been this good in a long time. It sounds kind of odd with all the things going on around us, but it's a great day to be alive. And I want to apologize to the audience. Been a little bit since we did our last recording, and I needed to take a little time with my family, much overdue time with my family. But also, the old saying, you can't work on your business when you're working in your business. And so I needed to do a little bit of that too. We're growing leaps and bounds. And so I needed to catch up with the growth and make sure that our team and our firm is staying on track to providing the service that we always do. So anyway, it's exciting to get back on air again and have the show today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back with you. And man, never apologize for spending time with your family. I know that you're an amazing family man and that they are the priority, which I think is exactly where they need to be. So I'm excited to be back with you, but I'm glad you had that time.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I appreciate that. But I am excited to chat. We've got some really what I believe to be some important information to pass on to folks today. And I am excited to get started about that. But before we do, as always, I want to just kind of touch base on the markets, what they're doing, what they're not doing, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. As we sit here today, the S&P is at 39.51, up slightly for the day after the horrible day on Friday. And so for those of you that don't know, today's recording what is today? September the 15th. Is that right, Eric?
I do believe so, yes.
Yeah, September the 15th as we record today. And the markets were not really happy last week about the announcement with inflation. So anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Dow is at 31,000 and some change. NASDAQ at 11,700. The NASDAQ's down roughly 25% for the year now. So that little false rally, as we call it, that happened, between mid-June and mid-August was exactly that. It was false. But, when I call false rally, as the markets do start to move downward as they have been, in every bear market, there are false rallies, or some people call it a head fake, like basketball, where they look like they found a bottom and they start heading north, only to move up against the index 200-day moving average, as they call it. And then that rally, it ran right up to the 200-day moving average, turned around and went due south immediately. So yeah, we're in a bear market. We're going to be in one, I think, for a little while here. I'm not sure how long that's going to be. But folks should not get too overly excited about these little mini runs north, because until we find some sort of healthy signs going on around us, we're probably not going to keep going north for a while.
Yeah, well, we're in it for the long haul or short haul. We don't know, but at least we're hunkered down and prepared.
Isn't that the truth? That's right.
Yeah, as much as we can be. Mm-hmm. All right, well, that is a great update. What are we going to be talking about today?
Well, and we call this show The Secrets of the Wealthy. And so, one of those secrets, I believe, is that wealthy folks see positive or potentially negative events coming, and they prepare for them. Mm-hmm. And, when I teach a lot, and I did just this week, and one of the things that always comes up is our national debt, which is now 31 trillion. I think when we first started doing these shows, I don't remember how low in the 20s we were, but it's amazing how much this debt is growing just in months at a time. But I think it's really important for folks, if we can get out the message that now more than ever, especially if you were a baby boomer, it's really time to protect. Mm-hmm. Protect your assets that you've grown all these years. Protect. And so we're not going to talk about that today. We'll talk about that on the next show, which I'm going to record quicker than usual after this show, just to try to make up and catch up on some lost time. But today we're going to be talking about something that recently got passed on Capitol Hill called the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. What it's going to do to us, for us, all that kind of stuff. And so people can know what's coming. And again, they can protect and prepare for that as we go. All right.
All right.
So, super. I want to start by just kind of talking about what the summation of this bill and the bill totals approximately $740 billion in new spending. Now, inflation numbers came out recently in the last few days, which is what caused the market to throw up. I'll use that word. I think the NASDAQ lost over 5% in one day because of it. And, inflation came out at 8.3%. They were expecting it to be lower. I read somewhere just this morning, I'm going to give you this headline. Retail sales, this is by Fox Business, by the way, retail sales unexpectedly edged higher in August despite high inflation. Now, how can that be? And so the chairman of Wells Fargo came out the other day. Credit card rates are now up to 18% again. Jeez. First time since, I think, 1996. Credit card interest rates, I'm talking, that people have to pay. Mm-hmm. That's the average. Now, there's some higher, obviously. And they were interviewing him on this podcast I was listening to, and they said, why is it that the spending is not slowing down with inflation and rates, going up? And he said that people are so brainwashed into consumption that they're not going to stop spending until the credit card company cuts them off.
That's terrible.
It is, and it took me a few minutes, Eric, to kind of let that one sink in and resonate with that. Like, can that really be? And then I read this morning, and it basically confirms what he said, right? Yeah. That even though everything is costing more and more and more and more and more, we're spending more. It just it's just not logical. And I guess we're just doing what the government's doing. So
seriously,
here we are. We got this problem, and they want to spend another $740 billion in new spending. So by comparison, the more comprehensive Build Back Better, you remember that way back when that was first trying to get passed, that legislation included many of the provisions that were introduced. I think it was early 2021 with a price tag of $3.5 trillion.
Yeah.
All right. Now we have a $31 trillion debt, and which is growing by about $1 billion every 75 minutes right now. And they want to add another $740 billion. And don't think that $3.5 trillion is gone. This is just the first step in getting all that done. Approximately $450 billion in new taxes, not including revenue that's going to be raised by the IRS. So that's kind of the bill totals, just so you get an idea of what we're talking about here. We have $31 trillion in debt, and I can't tell. I'm sure I've mentioned this on a previous show, but I can't say it too often, just so people resonate and understand how big a problem this is. But 1 trillion seconds equals 31,700 years, and that's 1 trillion, not 31. So this is a massive problem. It's only going to be fixed by higher taxes. It's the only way to do it. So what does the bill do? Well, it's a few things that the bill does. It has climate change involved. It provides tax credits and incentives for green energy, that sort of thing. It covers prescription drug costs. It gives Medicare price negotiation, on certain drugs. It has healthcare coverage details in it. It extends the ACA health insurance subsidies passed, which is part of the economic stimulus package back in 2021. And then it has a federal deficit reduction. And what this does, it reduces the federal deficit by $300 billion. Now let me put this in perspective.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So the federal deficit through June of 2022, okay, for the year to date, right, through June. This is not up to date through August, but through June, through half the year, the federal deficit was $515 billion. The federal debt is $31 trillion. So the $300 billion that they're going to reduce is a drop in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to touch it. And so that's just it's kind of comical, and they promote this stuff, and people hear 300 billion. That sounds like a big word until you measure it against a trillion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it sounds like it's slowing down, but it's going in reverse in a way, because we're still not. It doesn't even cover what is the first part of this year.
No. And I tell people, like in a class I taught last night, I tell people, I told them, I said, so if every citizen in the United States sent in $514,000 to the government, we would break even on our debt, but then we'd go back in debt the next day because we're still spending more than we're taking in. The other interesting fact, though, and this is something I haven't mentioned before on a show because it just came out, the Congressional Budget Office recently came out and said that they forecast, the CBO is known as the CBO for short, but they recently said that they're forecasting that the government will bring in more tax revenue than they will spend over the next 10 years. Now, let that one sink in for a second. So if they're forecasting this, they're telling us this is what's going to happen, but yet our spending right now is upwards of $6 trillion, and what we bring in is about $4.5 trillion a year. So what does that mean? That means they're telling us that we're about to raise taxes, or we're going to raise taxes, or we're going to raise them further. They're telling us it's going to happen. So if we don't get ready for it, shame on us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So what about new tax provisions in this bill? So 15%, there's a 15% minimum corporate income tax for large corporations. There is a 1% tax on stock buybacks. So if a company wants to reduce the number of shares that they have out there to, increase the value of those shares, and they want to buy back their own stock, they now have to pay a tax on their own stock when they buy it back. It's comical. $80 billion for new IRS tax enforcement, which is expected to raise $124 billion in new tax revenue.
Wait a second. Hang on.
So
did you just say $80 billion? They're going to spend $80 billion to get $120 billion?
$80 billion to raise $124 billion. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's what they call an estimate. It's not a reality, right? That's the first point. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? No. So in my business, for every dollar that I spend on marketing, my minimum threshold in return is 4. So if I spend $1, I need to get 4 back. Mm-hmm. I guess theirs is 1.5. So that's if everything goes well, which it never does.
Exactly.
Right? So it's really interesting. But once again, the CBO. So remember that promise we had, which was we're never going to tax anyone that makes less than $400,000 a year. Yeah, and so the committee, the Senate Committee on Taxation, has estimated, based on this bill, that 95% of those that will be audited from this additional tax enforcement will be making less than $400,000 a year, and over 50% of that 95% will be making less than $200,000 a year.
Jeez.
Now we don't know what the reality is going to be, right? We just know that that's what our own Congress is telling us. So something for all of us to look forward to, I guess, being sarcastic. So. All right, let's talk a little bit more impact. What's the impact it's going to have on us, and what kind of let's have an analysis. Let's do an analysis on this. This is my estimation on inflation is that the CBO has stated that this will have. Now, again, this is this Congressional Budget Office, our government office, right, has stated that this legislation is going to have a negligible effect on inflation. So it's called the Inflation Reduction Act. But the Congressional Budget Office says it's going to have they use the word, in quotes, negligible effect. That's a hard word to say right there, negligible, on inflation. It goes further to say that the nonpartisan, nonprofit Penn Wharton Business School model has stated the impact on inflation is, quote, statistically indistinguishable from zero, unquote.
Oh, jeez.
That's kind of I like the way that reads.
Yeah.
Statistically indistinguishable from zero, meaning it's going to be nothing. So,
yeah. Can we just change the name to Do Just About Nothing Act?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it sounds like to me.
Instead of the Inflation Reduction Act, maybe it's the Inflation Nothing Act.
That's right.
2022. Yeah.
Jeez. Who's running this show, John? I mean, honestly,
I don't know, but it's fun. It's entertaining it's really just entertaining to think that they would name this the way that they do, thinking that someone's going to believe it. I mean, obviously someone does, or they wouldn't do it, right? I mean, they're trying to move masses in their bit to their benefit. So either they're really poor marketers and they don't know their audience, or we should be really worried.
Hey,
one of those two.
Out of curiosity, is there a provision in this bill to replace all the limousines that they use for travel? Can we replace them with clown cars? Is it sorry?
Yeah,
the music,
I
circus music as they gather.
Yeah, I don't think so, but that would be great.
Oh, jeez.
All right, let's keep going on taxes. There's new proposed taxes on retirement accounts like IRAs, 401ks, and Roth accounts that were included in the initial Build Back Better bill were not included in this legislation, thank goodness. But if you think that's the end of it, then you're just not paying attention. Mm-hmm. So, the White House had a press release on the bill, and quoted President Biden as saying, quote, "It does not raise taxes on those making less than $400,000 a year, not 1 cent," unquote. But again, I told you earlier, the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates differently. And so, which is it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I just think that we all need to be prepared. If I can sum up that impact and analysis section right here, I think we all need to be prepared that taxes are going up. This is the one thing that I am absolutely certain of. Now, we know for certain they're going up at the end of 2025 because that's the end of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And for a couple making $76,000 a year, their income tax bracket will go from 12% to 25% overnight.
Lord.
At the end of that year.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of changes that will happen. So, and oh, by the way, the deductions are going to be going down as well. Not exactly half, but significantly less than we're used to. So the higher brackets, lower deductions. We know that's going to happen for sure. And the CBO knows that also, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, there's other taxes coming in many different formats. They're not all necessarily going to be just an increase in tax brackets or income tax. It's going to be in other ways, like, hiring 87,000 IRS agents. We have maybe 1,000 Border Patrol agents. So, those types of things we need to be prepared for. So, all right, let's get into some things we can learn from this. This isn't going to be a long podcast today, but I do think it's really important to put this out to folks so they kind of understand. And again, it's all about, I just believe that when it comes to our money, if we can know what's coming, good, bad, or indifferent, we can prepare for that, and we can almost always come out ahead. And that's what this is about. This is just helping people understand this bill, other than what they may hear, on the nightly news. Mm-hmm. It's just helping them understand it so we can be prepared for it. But here's some insights. The first thing that I've kind of said in a different way, but I'm gonna say it this way now. We are currently experiencing and will continue to experience a tax and spend era of legislation in Washington, period. They're going to keep spending. It's not going to slow down. Now we have $500 billion that just got waived. So we had $740 billion spent, followed by $500 billion that we're supposed to collect in student loans. That's now waived.
Yep.
And so that's now we're at the 1.3 trillion again, additional. And so if you think the spending's going to end, you just stop thinking that. It's just not going to happen. And so in order to pay for that, we've got a tax. So it's going to be a tax and spend era as for the foreseeable future. And so we need to be ready for that. And as this bill makes really, really clear, Congress's approach to reducing the deficit is currently focused on raising taxes. That is their focus. That's the only way. They say it right in the bill. We're going to pay for this by collecting more taxes, right? And so then they mask it by saying it's not going to be on anybody less than $400,000. But you can believe what you want to believe. But we're all going to pay the price for this, right? Third, we can expect this bill to be the first of multiple tax and spending bills that Congress is going to seek to pass. So, many of the Democrats' top priorities were not included in this bill. They'd be the first to tell you that. The original Build Back Better legislation, if we call it, carried a price tag of $3.5 trillion. So there's still roughly $2.8 trillion of legislative priorities that have yet to be funded. So it's probably reasonable to expect that future bills are going to seek, again, new taxes to fund these additional spending priorities that they're going to get done. They are not going to stop. They're not going to slow down. They couldn't push it all through at once. And so they're making concessions as they go with our famous senator in West Virginia, not to mention any names, but he got some concessions and they finally got him over to his side and we're able to push through this $740 billion. It's just going to continue to come. Right. And so fourth, new taxes on retirement accounts, and this is one positive we can take from this, that new taxes on retirement accounts were not included in this legislation. They've been a point in Congress's tax debates both this year and last year. It was in the original bill, the $3.5 trillion, and qualified accounts in particular are going to continue to have a heightened legislative risk, as we enter this era of rising taxes. So, Derek, have we mentioned in the past how I don't know. I do this when I teach a lot, but I talk about a very, very simple way that Congress could solve this $31 trillion problem. Have we talked about that in the past? I can't remember.
I don't know. Remind me.
Well, if you look at the amount of qualified accounts meaning IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, TSP, those kind of accounts that's never been taxed. There's something north of 72 trillion right now in those accounts that are going to be moving from one generation to the next. Right? And so if you're in Congress and you're thinking we've got to solve this debt problem, when we do, we have to solve it, because if we don't, our dollar's going to go to zero, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And we become sitting ducks, I think is the old saying, to be taken over. And so we have to solve the problem. So if we've got 72 trillion in these types of assets that haven't been taxed, well, half of that number is about 36 trillion, with a debt of 31, probably 35 by the time we get around to fixing this problem. So how do we get to that half? Well, right now, if I pass any type of my assets over to my child, if me and my wife were to die and then we pass this over to our child. Right now, due to the recent Secure Act, that money has to come out of there in 10 years or less. So what if they reduce that to 5 years and then they reduce it to 3 years, or then they reduce it to 1?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, all this money, the 70 some trillion, is going to change hands and it has to come out right away. Oh, and then let's raise rates to 50% tax rates.
Mm-hmm.
Which they were for 5 decades straight between the 30s and the 80s, 50% or higher. Got as high as 94. So if you force the money out, then the tax rate's 50%, problem solved.
Yeah. Sounds like an easy target.
Yeah. It's a big, I think they call it low hanging fruit.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
So yeah. And so if this is my encouragement to anyone out there that has any money in any of these types of accounts, if you're not talking to someone other than an accountant, if you're not talking to a tax planning expert as it relates to your retirement, you need to be doing that. We do that for the folks that we work with. And I think it's probably number one priority as far as retirement planning goes right now. So please, folks, I can't encourage you enough to please be talking to somebody about that.
Yeah. I think that this is the analogy that keeps going through my head is the perfect storm is coming, right? And those that are seeing it building out in the Gulf, seeing it building, offshore, they're the ones that are saying, okay, I need to run to Home Depot, get some plywood. I need to, make sure everything's buttoned up, everything's as secure as I can possibly make it before this thing makes ground, right? Mm-hmm. And we've seen the news. We've seen the run on a Home Depot or a Lowe's when the storm is already beating at the door and people show up and there's no plywood left. There's no plastic sheeting left. There's nothing left. It's already been taken because other people prepared ahead of time. And I think that's exactly what I'm hearing here is that we see the storm coming, right? It's brewing out there. And this isn't we're not trying to scare people. You're not trying to scare people. You're just trying to educate. And I appreciate that so very much because if people take the time to look at what's truly going on and they're like, let me grab my keys. I'm going to just jump over to Home Depot and just in case I'm going to make some plans and, do some things that are going to secure the foundation of my home or the foundation of my accounts.
Yeah, I had a couple other points, Eric, that I was going to make, but I'm not going to do it. I want to end with that, and I'm going to expand on it because, man, that was the old saying that facts tell, but stories sell. Sell in this case meaning trying to convince people to do something that's in their best interest in this case. But that was a best analogy anyone could come up with. Is not only do you know this storm is coming? So if you know it's coming and we're talking about a hurricane in this case and you don't prepare, shame on you. Yeah. But even worse, if you wait too late to prepare and then you try to prepare, you may not be able to anyway.
Exactly.
Because all of the tools or all of the supplies have been taken away. That is a really, really, really good analogy. And that's really what we're kind of saying here, that we know this storm, it's not a matter of maybe a hurricane will happen. The hurricane is out there and it's category 3. We know it's going to go to a 5. Mm-hmm. So if you know it's coming, let's get ourselves ready for it. And so I work with a firm called Stonewood Financial out of Kentucky, and they just do a great job of in a many, many, many different ways. And some of these facts and figures came from them, and I want to thank them for that. But I'm at the stage of my career. I'll be 59 next month, and they say they used to say, or I've hear people say that as you get older, you start seeing things differently, right? And I'm at the point now where I started doing these podcasts and I came kicking and screaming, as they say. My wife and my mentor really encouraged me to do them, and I didn't really want to, because I'm a little busy anyway. But now it's absolutely one of my favorite things because I just know that we're reaching people we wouldn't reach otherwise out there. And man, if we could just make a difference in one family's life, it's just so worth it to me. And I know you feel the same way, Eric, right?
Yeah, 100%, because the foundation that you're protecting is for that next generation. We see these old family homes that have stood for forever, and it just passes to the next generation, Well, that's what accounts do, right? Like that's what you're talking about, and how the taxation is going to work and possibly work in the future. You need to protect against that. So how do people that are listening to this get a hold of you? You've got to give your contact information, John, so they can start doing some of their own planning with you.
They do. So if we could take two things from this, and then we'll close for today, and I'll give you some contact information. But one is, it's all about protection now, folks. It's to protect yourself, especially those of us that are, born in 1963 or later. That's the baby boomers. Protect yourself against taxation. Protect yourself against running out of money in retirement, meaning that you've got to have enough guaranteed income to exceed your expenses for the rest of your life. If you don't have those two things in place, please reach out to us and let us help you get them in place. You can reach us at our website, which is Biltmore, BILTMORE-financial.com, or our direct main line is 817-225-6260. It would be an honor for us to help you in any way that we can.
John, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I always learn a ton, and I appreciate how much you're putting into these podcasts. I absolutely do.
Likewise.
You betcha. And our last thank you, of course, goes to you, listening audience, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Secrets of the Wealthy podcast with John Mintz. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when John comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask that you share this podcast, write a review maybe, and leave some stars for us, because this actually does help other people find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at the Secrets of the Wealthy, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Secrets of the Wealthy podcast with John Mintz. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of John Mintz. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.